So I thought it was time to delve into the dark mystical arts of the adaptations of the DC Vertigo Hellblazer comics that go under the name of Constantine. In Los Angeles, a cult demon hunter, John Constantine, exorcises a soldier demon from a young girl, which bodes ill as demons and angels are not meant to cross over onto Earth. Constantine sends his allies Hennessy, a former priest, and researcher and collector Beeman out to search for answers to this turn of events, and even unsuccessfully tries to enlist the aid of the famed Papa Midnight, who has sworn an oath of neutrality. Meanwhile, LAPD detective Angela Dodson has a vision of her twin sister Isabel's suicide at Ravenscar Hospital, which she is unable to rectify, as her sister was a devout Catholic. At the same time, Constantine learns that he's dying of lung cancer after years of chain smoking, but worse yet, he knows he's going straight to hell because of his own suicide years ago, due to being tormented by seeing things no human was meant to see. The paths of Angela and John continually cross until she seeks him out knowing his occult background, and while Constantine's abrasive attitude drives her away, he quickly realizes she's into something much more serious than either of them know. After fending off a horde of winged scavengers who should not be present on Earth, John goes into hell where he finds Isabel, confirming she took her own life. In light of this and the mounting deaths of John's allies by the half-breed demon Balthazar, Angela takes a desperate and bold step forward to have John unlock her deeper psychic powers that she shared with her sister. With all evidence pointing towards various forces of heaven and hell wanting to unleash an unholy evil upon humanity, the final cog has been making its way to Los Angeles in the form of the Spear of Destiny, which will require divine assistance and a very powerful psychic to bring forth the son of the devil. Now alongside his enthusiastic young friend Chaz, Constantine is forced to do whatever he possibly can to stop this apocalyptic power from crossing over into our world. So February 18th of 2005 saw the release of the long-in-development adaptation of the Hellblazer comic simply titled Constantine. And while that development kind of stemmed back to about 1997 with producer Lauren Schuler Donner, who would end up working on the X-Men films later on, and his wife to famed director Richard Donner, the origins of the character actually stems back to about the mid-1980s, with his first officially recognized appearance being Swamp Thing Volume 2, issue number 37 from famed writer Alan Moore in July of 1985. And between himself and artists Stephen Bissett and John Totleben, kind of wanted to design a character based around the frontman of the band The Police in the form of Sting, so kind of ended up with this blonde, trench coat wearing, chain smoking, cynical working class magician from Liverpool. And the thing kind of caught on. The character just had some sort of pull towards him in terms of his kind of darkness, his kind of anti-hero quality in a certain way. And so in 1988, they launched the Hellblazer comic series, which was really supposed to be titled Hellraiser, but obviously the Clive Barker film had come out the year before, kind of complicating matters, so had changed it to Hellblazer with kind of an ambivalent sort of reaction in terms of the need to change it. But getting to the original source of the entire mythos of the character here, writer Jamie Delano, who was the first one to work on the Hellblazer comic series, developed a lot of the background for the character. He got up and developed this whole punk band that he had called Mucus Membrane, and the very pivotal Newcastle incident where John tried to save this young girl named Asher from this demon by conjuring up another demon, but not putting the proper binding spell on that demon and end up damning Asher's soul to hell, and a lot of things like that end up hanging over the head of John Constantine. All these tragedies, all these things that he does wrong for other people, all the friends that he loses along the way and gets haunted by these losses and these different things that he puts people at risk and gets them sacrificed in a certain way for the things that he's doing, is a very complicated character, and these things really developed over the years, building up that backstory and see how all that kind of influenced his attitude, how to deal with things and kind of deal with things in the wrong way, and all the little things that kind of led up to the 1991 story Dangerous Habits, which is the most influential thing about the adaptation into the film. This entire storyline, developed by Garth Ennis, pretty much saw John getting cancer, lung cancer, for all these cigarettes he'd been smoking all these years, and basically got this entire wonderful, amazing story arc is very character driven, very kind of reflective, and dealing with him going back and looking at things in his life and all these little things, kind of come to terms with things and make amends, and trying to figure out a way to kind of get out of it. Because he knows there's these lords of hell down there. At least one of them has got the line on his soul that once he dies, he's going down there and he's going to be tortured for eternity by this one lord of hell. And so this wonderful storyline goes in an entire different way, where he does this con job on all these different lords of hell for his soul, to the point that if he ends up dying, all these factions are going to end up warring and tearing hell apart just to claim his soul. So it's more beneficial for them to cure his cancer and allow him to live, instead of tearing everything apart because there's one goddamn guy fucking up the system down there. So it's such a perfect story to get into the depths of the character here. He has so many interesting, fascinating qualities about him that come to light in the story, with all the dry wit and all the manipulations he does and all the people he's done wrong and all these little things that kind of build up and lay upon it and kind of twist things around in his perspective of different things and trying to manipulate the world around him towards his benefit. It's wonderful type of stuff. It's an amazing story, and that so much went into developing it for this film. And of course, with the eventual film adaptation here, they did have a couple of different directors who kind of came in and out of the project over the couple of years it was going on, until they kind of landed on the right screenwriters for this whole thing. And though they don't have a whole lot of credits to their name, they did get the right guys in terms of Kevin Broadbent, who had a lot of reverence for the source material of Hellblazer, and Frank Capello came in, did some rewrites to flesh things out and kind of tighten things up, refine them in general. But finding the right director for the whole thing was kind of the process of finding someone who had a very strong visual style to them, and also had a certain sense of he could be very much relevant in terms of how he would make a film that would appeal to a certain audience and get that certain style going, all these different things. And Francis Lawrence, he had done a whole ton of music videos since 1993. He had done a little bit of film crew work here and there and stuff like that. So this guy very much knew how to craft a very visually appealing type of thing, and definitely did his homework. He read the Dangerous Habits trade paperback. He read all this stuff to create his own presentation to present to Warner Brothers, to craft his own vision for it, his own style for it, and obviously won the directing duties on this thing and really brought a lot of things, even though there's a lot of different changes from the source material in terms of aesthetics, and a few other little things in terms of the mythologies around the characters and stuff like that, and the whole things with all the different supernatural stuff. There's a lot of stuff that does end up kind of translating, particularly about the character of John Constantine, I feel, from the source material into a much different type of package here. But visually, the film is exceptionally well done, especially through the lens of Oscar and BAFTA award-winning cinematographer Philippe Rousselot, who won his Oscar for River Runs Through It. He also photographed an Interview with the Vampire, The Nice Guys, the Guy Ritchie Sherlock Holmes films, and both Fantastic Beasts films. This guy's done a lot of good work, got a lot of nominations on top of his wins. Really good type of thing, and he makes this film look really goddamn good. I just like the sense of the mood and atmosphere you have in this whole thing, where you just got this sense of something else underneath the surface of the entire world that you know. I like that feeling that the film just introduces with how it composes things, how it kind of just has this lingering sense of how it shoots different segments of the entire film, just lets things kind of soak in a little bit, get you into the mood of everything that's going on, especially with this sort of amber and green color palette that they're using throughout the entire film. And I kind of like this whole shot composition technique they use in the film, where it's kind of get these close-ups where the character is right in the middle of the frame to see the emotion on their faces, see how they're reacting to certain things, how they're processing certain things in the whole film. I just like how it just gets in there and gets right into the nuance and the little details of the characters to see a little bit more into them, and just having a certain visual style about getting that right into the depth of everything, having a certain symmetry on screen in that regard. It has a very balanced feel in terms of how it's shot in general, and how it has certain moments where it has almost a surreal, dreamlike quality, certainly when Angela has this sort of dream or whatnot about her sister and certain things like that. and other little things that kind of go into the whole film, where you're getting a little bit more into the underbelly of the entire world and everything like that, getting a little bit deeper in like Papa Midnight's Club and various other things. It has a very striking visual style to it that I think just aids the film all over the place. That gets you into a much more of a supernatural sense of things. It has all these really good techniques and very smart ways of telling the story visually, where Francis Lawrence was so much talking about how the film didn't want to have so much exposition. They want to have kind of a matter of fact type of way of informing the audience, to make them think and make them understand and treat them intelligently, where you got this wonderful sort of character of Chaz in the whole film was kind of changed into sort of a sidekick character for John Constantine, where he's kind of trying to get deeper into the world that Constantine is in, and he's always asking these kind of almost like very exuberant questions about different things and stuff like that. He's just kind of excited so much about all this stuff, and Constantine always kind of sidesteps him a little bit and trying to kind of veer him a tad bit away from everything. It's like, I'm not going to tell you everything. You kind of have to get into the world and experience these things. So he's always kind of teasing a little bit, kind of just tapping a little bit on things. It's not going full bore, sitting you down and explaining the whole goddamn movie to you. Certainly later on, when Constantine has to kind of put out his backstory a little bit to Angela and get that sort of connection with the characters there, that works very well. But in general, the film doesn't spend a whole lot of time just sitting you down and explaining every goddamn thing. It's like they don't need to do that, and it would be a bad way of writing the film if they did that, because it would just bog down the whole film and just drag it out and make it a lot more monotonous. I like so much that they take characters matter-of-factly, and all these characters have a lot of shared history between John and Papa Midnight and Chaz and various other people, Beeman. These guys don't have to explain things because they know it already, so it's like it's smart screenwriting in that regard, and just have to get everything explained just in the amounts that you need to be able to push the story forward, but not everything needs to be explained. You can see how the scenes unfold and how visual cues inform the audience about what things are happening, how they're happening, and just get a little bit of pieces of information to explain further about the depth and the consequences of what's going on throughout the entire story. So in that regard, the screenplay is very well done, and they did a lot of stuff where they trimmed out different things in the film where they kind of, maybe that's a little too much, a little more indulgent than what we need to have here. We get a little bit more trimmed down, a little bit more focused in these different places to get whether it's the pacing right or the story elements kind of told in a much more succinct and more clever fashion in a certain way. So they really had a mind towards making sure that the narrative of the film was very much concise and could follow it easily and wouldn't get drawn down or dragged about through different things that you really didn't need to have in the process of telling this story. And of course, a lot of things did change in the adaptation of the comic books and the character when they went into this film, in terms of the casting process and gravitating towards Keanu Reeves for the role of John Constantine. As many people would probably know from a lot of films he's done, in terms of like Bram Stoker's Dracula and a few other things, he's not terribly great with a British accent. And so they decided to Americanize the character, and obviously because he's a very different complexion, he has dark black hair. They tried an olive-colored trench coat. They kind of tried sketches and whatnot with him bleached blonde and stuff like that, and it didn't really work at all. They even changed the details of his backstory to kind of change where he came from, how he came to be, who he is, and don't have everything like the Newcastle incident or a punk band or all these little things. He's kind of this accomplished warlock of some sort. It's very much a different backstory that kind of gets him to pretty much the same place, but they add in different elements of his backstory to kind of fit the story they want to tell, with the entire thing with the suicide early on in his life and kind of damning his soul to hell because of the sin, and kind of having that weave into the entire story they want to tell here, which again was probably somewhat objectionable to the diehard fans of Hellblazer, to change all these different things and make it not quite the right character. So again, it almost feels like an alternate universe version of the character so much that it still has very recognizable character traits, with a lot of the elements kind of changed in the surrounding qualities of the character here. But I do think that Keanu Reeves does channel a lot of the very good core qualities of John Constantine here, that he's got such a contemptuous nature about everything. He's very abrasive attitude towards all these different factions in the world and everything like that, trying to break the rules and kind of have their rhetoric and everything oppressed down to humanity, all these different things, and trying to bat humanity back and forth in their little chess game and stuff like that. He's very contemptuous towards that. Also, he feels a bit of injustice that he's been kind of slapped with this sort of curse that he views that he has, having been able to see all these things that no person's really should be able to see from the time he was a kid, and put him through all this goddamn shit, and it resulted in him taking his own life for that brief period of time and whatnot. So it's like he has all that stuff built up in his fabric of his being and whatnot to kind of stick it back towards all these things, all the stuff with the half-breeds and all these different things from the angels and the demons, heaven and hell. He just wants to stick a middle finger up to all of them, and he really kind of has that sensibility towards both ends of things, that when he's deporting the demon at the beginning of the film, The Exorcism, he has that attitude. When he's dealing with Gabriel, he has the attitude that the holier-than-thou stuff is just like, who are you to kind of put all this rhetoric down upon us and kind of tell me what's right, what's wrong, all this type of stuff. It's like, he's so much that he channels that so very well just in the script and how he portrays the character. He has, appropriately enough, a very grim sense about himself, dealing with the lung cancer and all these different things, knowing he's going straight to hell. I like the quality in the character in the film, that he just has just enough of a push to do the right thing, because he sees all these other things kind of breaking the rules and all these little things that whatever you guys are up to, I'm just here to fuck up your goddamn day. And that's very much John Constantine. That's like, you're just going to do it almost in spite of all of them to find out what the fuck is going on, because you do not have the right to go off and do all this shit and then all the other stuff you keep doing to humanity to kind of push and pull them at your whim. I love that quality of the character. I love what Keanu brings the character to have a gravitas about the character. He has a weight on screen so much, and you've got all the things, again, that are still very much faithful to the source material, where he's got all these friends he kind of puts a little bit in harm's way, and they kind of take the bullet for him so many times. They don't come directly at John. They come at him from everyone else around him. They keep putting up this sort of collateral damage around him and just kind of drives him forward. It kind of also kind of beats him up a little bit. So it's like all these little things still maintain a sense of knowing who the character is. Even if you're changing a lot of different details, a lot of different aesthetics, there's still a source of the character deep within this film. And definitely Keanu Reeves, I can feel the character there so much. I love that quality. I just love the quality overall. Love what Keanu brings to the role. When Keanu's in his zone, he can deliver a really good performance. I think this one really is a special type of thing that, again, despite all the changes, there's still the core qualities I think really do penetrate the performance here. It does a really good job. And I really like the casting of Rachel Weisz in this whole thing, because her and Keanu Reeves had worked together 9 years previously on the Andrew Davis film Chain Reaction, so they already had a familiarity built up. They had a certain chemistry they could tap into, and that really shows so much on screen. I like there's a sensibility between the characters, that not one or the other is really a dominant personality in the whole thing. They have a little bit of a thing back and forth towards one another, that she has definitely contempt for his attitude in certain places, stuff like that. She has a really good strength to her overall, that even though you got a lot of sympathetic quality with her character and her performance here, she has this kind of clairvoyant sensibility about her, the psychic sense that she builds almost an aura as she goes along, especially after she gets put through the entire process of going into hell, getting that immersive experience in the bathtub and transitioning into the other plane of existence there. She definitely has that light switch on her in those cases, or you just start seeing that in her performance so much. And just like the strength that she has as an assertive police officer or detective really shows you she has a wide range of abilities, a wide range of talent, and that definitely comes through so very well. And again, I like their chemistry so much. They just have so much going on that aids the film beyond anything you could do in a script. These two really have a synergy on screen that really clicks into place. You're really invested in both characters. You can definitely see how things kind of conflict between them, and then how they kind of bond a little bit. I like so much in the whole goddamn film. They keep teasing it many times, like 3 different times in the film, where they have this sort of moment where the camera will kind of push it on the two of them, and it'll seem like Constantine's almost going in for like a classic Hollywood kiss or something like that. It's like they just swerve you a little bit here and there, because I like so much that they're kind of playing on the expectation that you might want to have these two get romantically involved, but that's so much not the character of John Constantine. It doesn't feel natural for it. I like so much how they work together. They're really goddamn good together, and Tilda Swinton's a phenomenal actress. She's absolutely wonderful. And it was such a thing with the filmmakers that she was the actual choice. She was the number one only choice they had on their list for the character of Gabriel here, that they kind of built the cast around with a couple of A-list stars with Keanu, Rachel Weisz a little bit, to make sure they could sign a little bit more of an indie actor or whatnot, and studio had no absolute problems whatsoever. They absolutely loved her. They got her signed, and they wanted such an androgynous feel for the character of Gabriel that is such the interesting thing that, obviously, Tilda Swinton is a she, but Gabriel is referred to as he in the film. So they specifically set that up in the entire film just to have that sensibility about, just have this odd feeling about the character overall, that you just have a certain femininity in the softness of how the character kind of deals with Constantine early on, and kind of almost kind of mothering him in a certain way or something like that, and just have this sensibility that early on, that one scene with John there's just this sensibility that Gabriel is such a stringent believer in the word of God, the gospel, that type of stuff. And so she just kind of has this great quality performing the character here, and just kind of turning it on its head a tad, but just turning it that extra degree forward when you get to the end of the film and get everything revealed that Gabriel's the one behind all this stuff, and behind the Spear of Destiny and Mammon and all these other things. It's all been that type of plan overall. Gabriel wants to test humanity, kind of make them worthy of God's love. And all these different things are just like, it's pushed all the way to the nth degree of the entire thing. You're just crazy. You're insane. I just like so much that psychotic sense about it, that she doesn't play it like Crazy-Eyed or anything like that, but you just see the implications. She underplays the thing enough to make it scary, to make the implications so dreadful in a certain way. I just like so much how Tilda plays it, and like, I just love so much of what she brings to this interesting character that only really has 2 scenes in the whole film, but really builds something that's very compelling on screen, and just kind of adds so much into the texture of the entire world. I like so much how that kind of comes together with all of these characters come together, especially Djimon Honsou. This guy is another goddamn actor who's just off the charts good. He got first put on the map in Steven Spielberg's Amistad, and later did Blood Diamond with Leonardo DiCaprio, so the guy has done amazing work, and he does great goddamn work in this film as Papa Midnight. I just love so much the gravitas he has on screen, the mood they introduce with this character. I love the way they photograph him so much. First with this sort of overhead shot with just the brim of the hat. It just gives a certain mysterious aura about the character that just like permeates so much on screen. Just like they use all the right angles with the character, all the right stuff. He just has that presence, that charisma and all that type of stuff. I just love the whole thing. And they didn't change too much about the character in certain ways. Like, there's always been a kind of a little bit of a push and pull thing with him and Constantine. There's always been a little bit of a alliance and kind of adversarial type of thing. There's always a little bit, they kind of team up when it kind of suits them, and then kind of go off in different ways and kind of combat one another. So I like they kind of played a little bit here. There's a little bit more of an ally sense where he's kind of has this sort of oath of neutrality between all the different factions going on in this entire world. But I just like the sensibility about the character. It just has that power on screen that you feel so much, and just like, I like so much him and Keanu. They've got such great chemistry. They're just gonna spark something off really goddamn well. You just feel so much of the history with the characters. And just like, I just love the chemistry, the feel between the characters, how they carry each other, how they move the scenes, and just have this sensibility overall. I couldn't have seen anyone else really kind of nailing this kind of quality with his character so much at the time. He's really damn special, and I like so much getting Gavin Rossdale in this whole film. He's a great goddamn rock star. He's a really goddamn good actor, too, as the half-demon, half-breed Balthazar. Man, the guy's deliciously evil. He's so he's such a slimy piece of shit that you just really want to see John just fuck him over really bad. And you definitely get to see that. The two work off so goddamn well. I really like what Gavin does with this character. He's just like, he's really relishing the entire experience. I like it so much. It's like, you're coming down to hell soon. I can't wait to taste it. All this type of stuff, and just like, there's such a cool thing with just like Gavin Rossdale being in this film with Keanu Reeves, and then 14 years later his band Bush contributes the song Bullet Holes to John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum, which I completely flipped out over when I actually realized that connection all the way back to Constantine, with Gavin and Keanu back together in this type of way. And also you have Stormare, who appears as Lucifer in Constantine, also shows up in John Wick Chapter 2 as the brother of Michael Nyquist's character from the first film, And just another great role performance. There's all these little connections back to Constantine where a lot of people kind of pick up on the Matrix ones, kind of geek out over those. The Constantine ones really kind of do something a little special for myself. Stormare is phenomenal as well. Just like all these amazing goddamn actors are bursting out the seams of this movie. There's so much charisma. There's so much talent. There's so much interesting stuff with what he does with Lucifer. Just like, I love the fact that when he shows up in the film, he's almost like he's kind of twitchy and kind of almost like he's kind of trying to fit back into like a flesh suit or whatnot, a human flesh suit or something like that. It's like he hasn't been on Earth for a very long time. It kind of has to feel his way back out and how to move in this world and everything. I like just that kind of way he moves on the screen. It's like, it's so unnatural. It just gives the character this sort of just intensity about what he's doing, kind of that restraint he's kind of showing in certain places. Like, it just has so much energy. I like so much what he just kind of just gets into the entire thing, and just like he works so goddamn well in these scenes. There's like, I like so much that he doesn't have to flex. He doesn't have to flex his muscle in a certain way. Just like, it's Lucifer. What's he got to get mad with anyone about? It's like, this guy's been around since like the dawn of goddamn time. He's so much more powerful than all these other characters. Like, Gabriel doesn't pose a threat to him, all this type of stuff. And it's like this little piece of shit kid he's got is trying to move it on his territory. It's also like a mob boss or something like that, you know? It's like all these little pissant motherfuckers trying to move in on your territory. It's like, just get the fuck out of here. I'm going to smack you around a little bit and take back control of the entire territory here. So it's like, Stormare, the way that they directed it, how they had the vision for the character, that Stormare was like, he didn't want to have a lot of prosthetics. He got a little bit of the tattoos on there, did a little shaving of the eyebrows, the sideburns, but he didn't want to get made up. He wanted to perform the character. He wanted that to be the character. He wanted so much that what he could do physically made the character pop out on screen. He didn't have to do a whole bunch of stuff on him. He could make the character look interesting and feel interesting and grab everyone's attention so much. As it's like so much how it all progresses up to his reveal. I like so much all the damn things. How the entire narrative of the film, that Constantine learns he's got cancer. He's going to be dying soon. And that kind of runs like a wildfire through the entire underworld and stuff like that. And so everyone knows about it. It's like everyone keeps telling him, you're the one soul Satan would come up here to collect himself. And so he uses that when things are at the wit's end of like, there's nothing more I can do within my own power. I'm going to summon the most evil son of a bitch I can possibly find to take care of the goddamn situation, because there's so much Constantine that's like, he's going to play the different sides against one another and kind of pit them back and forth and kind of screw everyone over. It's like, okay, it brings off Satan to take care of that problem, but then through his selflessness and trying to save Isabel's soul, he ends up kind of screwing over Lucifer in the process as well. So it's like everything kind of plays against one another. Whether he entirely intends it or not, it all kind of works back and forth, and he kind of backs it back around on everyone else, and he's the one who kind of comes out on the better end of it. And everyone else has a little bit of a grudge to hold at the end of the day, but he comes out fine with it. So it's like, it's so much how all this stuff with the characters comes together very well on a screenplay that works on such an organic fashion, how everything leads to one another thing, and everything threads through all together, and phenomenal performances with so many damn good actors. Even Shia LeBouef, before anyone got annoyed by him, puts in a nice performance with Chaz, who does get changed from the comics, where he was much more of a contemporary of John, that he was pretty much the exact same age, they grew up together, and they had a certain parody about themselves. But it was just like Chaz was much more naive in a certain way. He wasn't as much of a gruff type of personality. He was a little bit more positive type of person and didn't have as much trauma in his background. So they kind of altered it a little bit in what they felt a little bit more familiar for audiences or something like that, to make a younger character a bit more of a sidekick sensibility. But Shia does bring a lot of good quality comic release to the film and makes a very endearing, charming character that I think really connects with audiences, hopefully. When all these bad things start happening to all of John's friends, and I think it starts to weigh on people and starts to hit those emotional beats that you want to. And I like that Chaz is that sort of last straw in the entire thing, where John's like, fuck it, I'm done with this. I'm pulling out everything I've got. I'm not sitting around and playing games anymore at the end of the film. So it's like, I like that it has emotional consequences. All these characters have emotional consequences as you go through the film and have the story unfold and things kind of impact everyone else in the entire film. It's very well put together and very exceptionally well acted. And aiding the film so much in its mood and its atmosphere is definitely the score from Klaus Vidalt and Brian Tyler, who I've talked about in the last two Rambo films, and at this time he had done the Bill Paxton directed film Frailty, did Don Coscarelli's Bubba Hotep, William Friedkin film The Hunted, and the Richard Donner film Timeline, which was originally scored by Jerry Goldsmith, but after Donner had to recut the film, he needed a new score, and sadly Goldsmith had passed away, so Brian Tyler stepped in, replaced the score, and obviously carried on Goldsmith's legacy with the Rambo films. And with this score, it is pretty damn good. It's like they have this nice electronic orchestration in with the regular sort of live orchestration with the strings and the horns and stuff like that, but it has a certain sensibility about it that does have that air about that sort of oral a little bit here and there and stuff like that, but it doesn't stand out too much. But when you kind of listen to the score on its own, it is pretty damn good. There's really good dramatic and action beats in there and stuff like that, and kind of stuff that aids towards the ominous feeling of the film. It does have certain really good cues to it, but overall it doesn't strike as strongly as you possibly would imagine, but it still does a very good job to aid the film in a lot of different cases. And also had a nice little soundtrack song here from A Perfect Circle called Passive off their album Emotive, and put together a whole music video that's not able to be found in the terribly best quality possible. Kind of on the Blu-ray and the DVD, they kind of did a 4x3 letterbox format, so the resolution isn't terribly great and you really can't find it anywhere online. But it's a really good music video. I really like this song so much because it melds so much with a sonic sense about the entire score as well. So it's like it fits so well in the entire rest of the film when you get John going into the pub midnight club and get the entire sequence there and get that sensibility about the film and get a little bit into the underbelly, so like it feels really good in the entire film. The music video is really goddamn good because they integrate so much of the visual style of the film. The entire hellscape they have in the movie is integrated into the visual style of the actual video with the band playing all this different type of stuff. I like it so much on a sonic level and on the music video level as well, because talking about the goddamn visual effects in this film, they are, for the most part, fucking excellent. I like so much, there's so much imagination with the designs in this whole film, with all the demons that you get, the ones you see in hell with kind of their heads kind of half chopped off and they don't have brains and they don't have eyes and whatnot. It's like there's just like these instinctive creatures that just swarm you and everything like that. And I love the entire scene where you got Angela and John there on the street and everything, and you start seeing the lights blink out in the distance and kind of building up, and you got the winged scavengers of the damned and whatnot coming in, and the talons, all that type of stuff, and he burns the Shroud of Moses. Wonderful type of stuff. Just like it looks so goddamn good. So much of what you have on the visual end of things with the cinematography melded with the visual effects looks really goddamn good. It all comes together as a cohesive vision. I like so much that they use Stan Winston Studios for a lot of the physical, practical makeup effects in this whole thing, and they look absolutely phenomenal when you get Balthazar's face kind of half taken off with the holy water, and a lot of that's practical stuff that's really done on Gavin Rossdale's face, and they did an amazing job with that because Stan Winston Studios is the best of the goddamn thing there is. And just again, there's a few things in the visual effects that might not hold up quite as well as some of the other things, because they did employ a couple different studios in the entire thing. Like when the shadowy figure comes up, which ends up being Gabriel, and kind of does this whole thing to kind of burn away the rest of Balthazar there. It's like, maybe not the terribly best stuff in the film, but it's not bad. It's not really bad at all. But like so much of the other stuff just looks so fucking great. And I love so much, again, they melded the practical with the digital. They didn't just use digital for everything. They did a lot of practical stunts and practical stuff in camera to use as guides for all the stuff, like the vermin creature that John encounters on the street. They had an actual guy in sort of a mock-up suit so they could actually get a point of reference for what they were going to composite into the scene. And so much like when you get Angela kind of being pulled through the office building, that did the entire, all that stuff getting burned through the walls and whatnot, getting shot through the walls, was shot practically. That's not digital effects. They digicomposited Rachel Weisz into the scene with her own stunt work, but it's all kind of practical elements kind of composited on one another. So they had a really good way of putting all the stuff together to really create very high quality effects using the right tools for the right jobs. I like so much that goes back to a lot of really smart filmmakers over the years. You don't just use one tool for everything. You get the kind of Swiss Army knife of visual effects and use everything you have at your disposal to create the best result possible. I like so much of the effects in this film. They just look absolutely great. All this stuff looks fantastic. The hell landscape is just a marvel in a certain way. I like so much. They tease you at the beginning of the film with the company logos and everything like that, turning into the hell versions of them. So you can set that up and kind of put it off in the film and reveal it. Because they originally intend to have maybe one or two extra hell sequences in the film. One, they couldn't afford it. And two, Francis Lawrence actually decided that you need to make it special. It needs to be an event when it happens, so when you first get John going in there, you hold it off until the end of the film when Angela gets dropped in the pool in Ravenscar, which is actually a thing that's carried over from the comics as a mental institution that actually John gets committed to, so nice little tie-in there as well. But when she drops in there, that was the next one they had, so that's the only ones they used in the actual film. They took out all the other sequences where they intended to have it in there and pulled it out, because if you do it too many times, it desensitizes the audience and doesn't make it much of an impact on a story level when it comes back up in the film. So I really like how that was all kind of constructed. Francis Lawrence was very smart in how he was putting these things together and pulling things out. Again, some of it was budget, but a lot of it as well was just like seeing the film constructed. We don't need that. Don't put that in there. It's going to dilute what we have as an important point in this film. You don't need some of these other sequences. You can cut this stuff out. It doesn't need to be there. Again, all those choices that are made in the editing and the construction of the film, all these different things that take out what you realize you don't need, tells me this film does have a good director ahead of it, and he did make a good film. I think he made a really good film. But a couple of years ago, Francis Lawrence did a couple of interviews when he was on the press runs for Red Sparrow and got asked about Constantine. And there were a couple of things that he felt like he would change in retrospect about the film. One of the things was the dry wit of the character of John Constantine, which is very prevalent in the comics, not so much in the film. And I can certainly see that sort of perspective, but I do like how kind of dire the character kind of feels throughout the entire course of the film here. That just has this sort of just down and out quality that it really doesn't even have the charisma to kind of push out to be sardonic or something like that. He's much more just cynical in a certain way and just very jaded and almost kind of defeatist in a certain way. So I can kind of see his perspective, but I also kind of like how the film treats the character and the tone that it kind of weighs down upon him. And also because they actually shot the film for PG-13, but got an R rating instead, and he said that if he knew he was going to get an R rating, he would have made a much harder R-rated film, which I think definitely would have kind of benefited the overall tone, getting much more from that mature line of Vertigo comics into the film. If you could put more stuff in there that had much more of an R-rated edge to it, I think it would have just benefited in general, because generally I don't see much that really kind of constituted the R rating for the movie. And also he kind of felt like the film maybe was a bit too much focused on the sort of world building and sort of supernatural gobbledygook that he kind of said. For me personally, for knowing how much deep background there is in the comics, a much more wider mythology with all the different gods and the ancient powers and all the different supernatural things, they really narrowed it down and really kind of stripped a lot of that away for the film, so they kind of maybe would have benefited from the inverse of that, kind of getting a little bit more of that in there, because if you ever were going to go ahead with a sequel, you really didn't have anything left over from this film to push forward in the sequel. You've kind of eliminated Constantine's entire supporting cast. You've kind of put out the angels and demons in this big story that if you're going to do it again, you've got nothing else to pull on from this film to kind of build up another storyline. So they kind of used up everything they put into the film. So there's a lot less of that. And he said basically you would kind of like make it much more of a relatable type of realistic world. So I still think the style for the film really works well. It gets you into the mood of all these different supernatural qualities of the entire Hellblazer mythos. That's not as much in here as there possibly could be. So I think the inverse would work for a much more substantive and much more fascinating type of story to be told and a world to explore further. So I've still enjoyed it all these years, even though there's a lot of things you could change and make it much more faithful to the source material and stuff like that. It's still entertaining. It's still something I really enjoy. I enjoyed it so much at the time. I saw it in the theater twice because so many things I was kind of doing creatively at the time, developing these supernatural stories with an anti-hero at the head of it and stuff like that. Just like this mirrors so much of what I was doing at the time creatively. Just like it just hit so strongly, and I just enjoyed it so much. But it's kind of the thing that wasn't really all that much of a success of a film. Having a budget between $75 and $100 million, it only grossed about $230 million worldwide. So it's kind of in the middle, on kind of like the edge of being a real success. So it makes a profit, but it's not like a big hit. And being like a Vertigo title, it's not really a mainstream type of thing to get immediate recognition in the marketplace. And they try to do the big star with Keanu Reeves to get that kind of draw into the film, and it just kind of was one of those things, like, it got some good reviews and general things, like, it just didn't quite break all the way through to really kind of make it a major success to kind of greenlight sequels and do stuff like that if Keanu was even going to do a sequel. So it was like all these different things over the years, like they were going to maybe do a sequel with a much lower budget, with a much more scaled down concept or something like that. Sometimes Keanu was not very interested. Much later, he was much more interested, but these things kind of went along until like about 2012, they announced they were going to do this like Justice League Dark movie, and they ended up saying that was being helmed by Guillermo del Toro, who many people know from Blade 2, Pan's Labyrinth, Hellboy, all these wonderful things. And it just kind of gets stuck in rotation here. It gets kind of stuck in development hell for the next couple of years, where they do a couple different drafts, they kind of do things here and there, and who knows if Keanu was going to be involved with it or not. It never really kind of came to fruition, even though Del Toro left, and then Doug Liman stepped in, then he stepped out, and they kept trying to go off in different places where this thing would be an entire conglomeration of guys like John Constantine and Swamp Thing and Deadman and Zatanna. This really fantastic thing would be much more of a superhero, supernatural team-up type of movie, so it'd be, as the title suggests, much darker type of subject matter. That was originally going to be kind of titled Dark Universe, but obviously that whole Universal Dark Universe thing that would bombed kind of wiped that title out of existence. But it's just one of those things, like, it was such an interesting, fantastic concept to have Guillermo del Toro involved with it, and it just went absolutely nowhere. But in the midst of all this whole thing, knowing that the 2005 movie is as my opinion is, I think it's a pretty damn good movie, but it wasn't the most faithful thing you could possibly do with the character, moving him into a much more live-action medium. So in 2014, they launched a series on NBC, also titled Constantine, led by Matt Ryan, having the thing be much more faithful to the actual comics that it came from. Despite the fact that I thought the pilot episode, which I saw at the time, saw the original version, saw the retooled version, and then I tried watching it again recently, I don't think the pilot episode is a very good piece of work. I thought there was a lot of things that just generally didn't work in terms of the writing and the direction, the look of the show from that first episode didn't catch my interest. And so at the time, I didn't actually watch the series up until recently while I was preparing for this video. And they did a lot of good things. They saw the problems they had with the pilot. They kind of wrote a character out. They were kind of setting up in that, went in a different direction, and just did a whole bunch of great things to make it a much better, stronger show. You can see it as it goes along very quickly in this 13-episode run. They did a much better job. They did a fantastic job with it. Matt Ryan is a fantastic John Constantine. I thought he did a wonderful job because he's a Welshman, not from Liverpool, but it's close. It's close enough to the nationality. Dyes his hair blonde, put on the right outfit, all these different things. They're much more faithful to the source material in terms of all the mythological things. His backstory is completely intact from the original comics. All these things. His supporting cast with the character of Chaz, portrayed by Charles Halford, is much more faithful to the one in the comics to a certain point. Instead of being British, he's now American, but he generally has the same basic characterization so much, and he did a fantastic job in that role. They also got a wonderful Papa Midnight. Michael James Shaw is wonderful in the role. I loved every moment he came on screen because, again, it's even more faithful than what Djimon Honsou got. He was much more a darker character in such a way. He was this guy dealing in the dark arts and kind of doing all these kind of darker sort of back alley kind of things and doing the witch doctor type of stuff, just like it's really fucking good. And you see this adversarial conflict between him and John, but then you see moments where they have to kind of team up for the greater good of things. They got sort of a common enemy that's kind of fucking things over. They got to team up and do stuff about it. So they saw the flaws, changed the things, up the quality of the writing, up the quality of the production, all these different things. Just looked like a much better show as they got going and got the things in place and started moving forward. But unfortunately, NBC really wasn't the best place for it because it ended up not getting the best ratings, and they canceled after 13 episodes, right after there was a big season-long plot development that would have changed everything for the rest of the goddamn season. Just leaves you on this cliffhanger of like, everything's unresolved, and it just really pisses you off because it was getting so goddamn good. They even had this 2-part episode in there that I thought was absolutely wonderful. Matt Ryan is fantastic as the character. He's absolutely wonderful in all this stuff. He has all the right elements of the character. He's got the dry wit. He's kind of a snarky asshole, but he's got the right amount of charm in the character. There's enough things that you can kind of forgive and redeem him as he goes along in these different stories, and having all these things from his past come back up, and all these wonderful, interesting, fascinating type of stories kind of coming up, and having a certain sense of atmosphere to everything as well. So it's like, they hit it so very well that it's such a shame that it got canceled. But thankfully, there were still a lot of important people who did have a reference for it and wanted to see at least Matt Ryan's interpretation of the character live on. So in a season 4 episode of Arrow, they brought back Matt Ryan as John Constantine into that universe and have him work in resurrecting the soul of a character who had died, and just kind of carried him on from that point onwards. He kept making more appearances. He would keep showing up in different things here and there. In Arrow, they bring him in the Crisis in Infinite Earths crossover. They brought him into DC's Legends of Tomorrow, which apparently has a bit of a wonky tone in a certain way that some people probably don't think is probably best for the character, but the fact that they're still keeping the character alive to some degree, I think is a positive type of thing, that after 6 years since the debut of that series, the character is still living on through his performance, and he's still doing a really goddamn good job of it. I just wish that hopefully there can be a revival, there can be something that can continue on from this story that they had going on in that season, or just bring some of these characters back, because they had a fantastic regular cast. But regardless of that, Matt Ryan has continued on with the role, and I think both Matt Ryan, who's actually really the best version of this character we've gotten, but both him and Keanu have done a good amount of justice to this character in general, but there's always room for other people to step in and do things if they want to do different versions and another film adaptation or whatever they're going to go with. There's been rumors of a Justice League Dark HBO Max series now. We'll see where that goes. There's very, very early rumblings about that. We'll see how things develop. Who knows where it's going to go, if anywhere at all now. But guys, I just want to hear what you guys think about Hellblazer, Constantine, all these different things, especially the television series and everything Matt Ryan's been doing over the last couple of years, and all these guest appearances now regular on DC's Legends of Tomorrow. Just throw the stuff at me and everything you think about the Keanu Reeves film as well. So I really dig it. I really think the film is a good piece of work, even though there's a lot of things changed and doesn't really kind of line up as faithfully. I think Keanu Reeves did portray the character in a very good fashion, but obviously Matt Ryan has kind of trumped the entire thing with a much more faithful adaptation that feels very much in line with the character so very much. And I like the fact that NBC, at least with their standards and practices and stuff like that, in terms of dancing around the smoking issue, they didn't pull the punches in terms of portraying the character very well. They didn't make him too much of a hero. They still made him an anti-hero so much, and made him such a flawed character to have all these different things in his background to make him not pulled away so much from the core of who the character really is. So thanks so much, guys. It's been a very, very good video that I've been working on for a long period of time. And if you're interested, if you can, there is the Patreon to support things around here a little further. So guys, thanks so much. Take care. Bye-bye.